And Richie, you know that the focus will now, from a Chelsea point of view, go on to the future of the manager. And he has a contract till 2019. We know that he does not sign the players. He's on record as saying that, and that we discussed that beforehand too. Where does that go now?
I think before this tie, it looked as if, given what we know from a distance, the relationship that the manager has with certain personnel above him within the club has broken down completely. He's made public his gripes that he's not in charge of the transfers or doesn't even get listened to when it comes to the transfers. You could turn around and say, well, you knew that was the case before you went in there, but he's obviously unhappy. I don't think the club would be particularly happy with him. Apparently he goes via his assistant manager to speak to the club director, Maria Granovskaya, who makes all the decisions. So I can't imagine any other outcome in the summer other than him leaving. And I think this result tonight only makes that even more likely.
I think Richard, he has said he will honour the contract, but you know we'll see what happens in the coming months.
Yeah, and I think there'll be a big job in Paris as well in the summer. I know PSG will probably get rid of their manager, and Conte and Mourinho will be the two people that they'll be looking at, knowing that they are unsettled at their clubs. And I think for Chelsea, they will move him on. It's where they go next. You know, I think, who do they look at? Maybe Pochettino or someone like that if they can take him. But they need to go with someone who can add a little bit of energy into that team, a little bit of pace maybe or something into it, because they are short. They're still short, and somewhere along that line in that dressing room there's a negative influence, because there's bad stories coming out all the time. Players down tools really easily, and within that group there's a group of players who aren't being professional in that group when it comes to listening to the managers, to listening to whoever they are. They're letting out tales and they're not performing on the field.
Yeah, Eamon, how serious for you is that issue? And we mentioned it when we were talking about Hazard before the match, that there is he's a fantastic player, but like some of his colleagues, there is that tendency to down tools, I guess, professional players.
Yeah, well, they down tools in Mourinho's last year and got him sacked. Because and that was Fabregas was at the heart of that, I would say. I think obviously Hazard is an important player, and the senior players and the better players set the mood, not just in the dressing room, not just on match day, but the training ground. If you're all in together, you win together, you lose together. That kind of culture and that kind of atmosphere is important. Now, I think Conte went there and picked that club up off the floor and that group of players, Richard. I mean, and they won the championship, and so haven't had a bad start. Lost 3-1 to Arsenal, and were poor. These are his first few games. Lost to Liverpool at home, were poor, and he got Victor Moses, who'd been out on loan for 3 or 4 years, played him as a wing back. Alonso converted him and made a team, like in a matter of weeks, that went on and won the Premier League very convincingly. And I think he's a top-class coach. Now, what he needed to take the next step up was players, because now they've got the Champions League to contend with and the expectations of champions, and that's when the fault line. And the other thing was Costa, the centre forward. He was unhappy. He was 22 goals he scored last year.
Big player. Yeah.
Take him out, you don't score goals, and that's what's happened. So I think he's a very good coach. I think he's conducted himself with dignity. He will find a job, maybe in Paris, and he'll prosper. Chelsea will go on being a bit of a mess, and the answer Abramovich or his people would give you, yeah, we sacked Ancelotti, yeah, we sacked Mourinho, yeah, we're going to sack Conte, but we've won the Premier League 5 times in the last 10 years.
Yeah, and a Champions League, and these are the things that they will point to.
I think one of the flaws, I think, in the setup of Chelsea, and you would hear it every time a manager seemed to be under pressure. There would be stories leaked to the newspapers that the key players within the dressing room, go back to John Terry's day and Frank Lampard, they would have discussions with the owner, or they had some kind of access or line of communication to the owner. And I'm thinking, why are the players speaking to the owner? Like, I think it always fed into this idea that the players weren't as accountable in Chelsea, or the culture wasn't set up that they would take responsibility, because when things go bad, They'll just speak to the owner, repeat a few gripes. If they're not happy with the manager would go.
That's what happens incidentally at Real Madrid.
Exactly, and that just it doesn't lend itself to a properly functioning
and then look at the trophies as well. We're going for 3 in a row.
Yeah, well,
Chelsea 14 trophies since 2003.
Going back through Real Madrid's history, recent history, Ramos, Casillas, the goalkeeper, Raúl, they could all go to Perez, the president, straight away, bypass the manager.
But what about the Chelsea manager now? I think you made the point beforehand, Richie, about him getting the players together and this kind of discussion about the playing style. Now,
yeah, I wondered what was behind that, because we know there's fault lines between the manager and the club. So I wondered whether it was an attempt by the manager to kind of galvanise the dressing room, so they'd kind of firm up the bond between him and the players. Maybe he felt that was needed. And also I think whether or not you listen to what the players say in a meeting like that, whether you just ignore everything they say and do the thing you always would have done in relation to team selection, what a meeting like that does, implicit in that whole meeting is the message that you respect what the players have to say. You respect their opinions, you want to hear it. So I think it was an effort by Conte to boost morale, boost confidence, to kind of improve the atmosphere in the dressing room before a tie like this.
See, what happened, I think the rot started with Diego Costa. He downed tools last December, 12 months, halfway through the Premier League, when they were top of the league and challenging. And there was a lot of trouble between him and Conte on the training ground. There was a row. I think the deal was, Conte said, OK, play for me until May, let's get this job done, then you can go. Now, Abramovich wasn't in that conversation. And Conte texted Costa, said, I don't want you anymore. They'd won the title. That's the problem. Abramovich did want him. In other words, Abramovich or his people thought they could persuade Costa. On the point of principle, Conte was right. I don't want that guy in my dressing room. And what I say has to go. So what would you do, Richard?
Yeah, he was right to get rid of him.
He was
right to get rid of him.
But that was that deepened the rift.
Yeah.
But do the players then ultimately, in the long term, say he would have had pals in that dressing room, as you say, it was the right call, but do the players ultimately win? Because the players, if they get into a situation where they down tools, can get the manager removed.
Yeah, they will do, and they'll continue to do it while they get away with it, because that's going back to what Richie said about having that meeting with the players. That instantly puts the responsibility onto the players. If you say, how are we going to play against Barcelona, and they're not happy how they played against Man City, or they're not happy how they played in the first leg, the players then say, well, we want to press them, we want to do this, or we want to do that. If the manager agrees to that, all the responsibility is on the players then, and they have to perform. And I actually thought they performed reasonably well today. They put an effort in, they really tried, but the quality wasn't there in the end. But as a club, it's just so often the responsibility is just passed straight to the manager. And the players, if the manager comes out and criticises them, they all sulk, they all moan, they all say training's this, and it's never their fault. And that's where the big problem is at the club.
Yeah, leadership in the dressing room is so important. In the recent history, they had John Terry, Frank Lampard, Drogba, big characters, big leaders, good pros, right? No messing. There'd be no down in tools with those guys in the dressing room, because they break your jaw, and that's the way it should be. But now, absolutely,
there might be easier ways to do it. But anyway.
I tell you what, I've seen guys put them against the wall. No, but it would happen if a player threatened or played like Hazard played 2 weeks ago against Manchester City. Someone would get him afterwards in the dressing room.
And he wasn't the only one that day.
No, he wasn't. But there isn't a John Terry on the pitch. There isn't a big character there.
But within a dressing room like that, aims at a certain culture is created where certain standards just aren't acceptable. And then in the wider picture, within a club, to use the phrase we've been using all night, if a player downs tools for any length of time, you're gone. Right, you're gone. That's not acceptable. This is a level, this is a club where that's not acceptable. But in a structure like Chelsea's, where you're looking at the manager who doesn't have full authority, so falling out with the manager isn't the nightmare scenario it used to be, because the manager had all control back in the day.
But that structure is repeated at a lot of other clubs, isn't it?
Well, look, take the Irish team when Richard was there with Damien and Robbie Keane, right? All the miracles they did and all the great things they did despite the limitations of the player's ability, you wouldn't stand for that, would you? If someone wanted to put down tools.
No, because everyone's accountable.
Exactly, and you're accountable to your mates.
Yeah, you're
and
accountable
your teammates.
to your teammates. At Chelsea, because they've got away with it, regardless of who the manager is, and the managers that they've had are winning managers who have either won leagues, Champions Leagues, Cups, whatever it is, the players bypass them because the owner lets them away with it, or the owner or the technical director, whoever it is, always associates the blame with the manager and just thinks, well, if Hazard's not happy, that must be the manager's fault.